Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and I'm on vacation, so due to various complexities of being on vacation, I'm going to just do a four-shot of a tetralogy, quadrology, whichever you prefer, and I'm going to be covering the Enchanted Forest Chronicles. So, the interesting thing about these books, one of the first interesting things about these books is actually the order in which they were written. Most people read them in chronological order of events. That is, event A happened, then event B happened, and then C, and then D. Or in this case, dealing with dragons comes first chronologically, and then searching for dragons, calling on dragons, and then talking to dragons. However, Talking to Dragons, which is a book that I do not actually own on its own, so I borrowed the picture off of the internet. And as usual, I'll give you, source links for the picture and the video if anybody thinks it's important. This book was actually published first. It was published in 1985, if I'm recalling correctly. I didn't grab the book and put it in front of me right away, so the thing is that because this was published in 85 and the first book chronologically in the series dealing with dragons was published in 1990, technically this one came first. Even though this is the events that happen at the end of the whole series. Or at least at the end of the tetralogy, there is in fact a short story follow-up to this, but I'll get to that at some point in the future when I get to it. So, Talking to Dragons. Talking to Dragons is not the best written book in the series. You can see Patricia Reedy, and yes, her surname is pronounced Reedy, not Reed, as one would expect. You can see that she's still learning her craft. There are flaws in how she presents the characters, in how they act. But you can also see, by comparison with the rest of the series, that she's still feeling her way out in terms of what these books are about. And I'm probably going to have to give away something about the next couple books as I talk about this, but the big thing in the next couple books is that they are fractured fairy tales. They are stories where one presumes that fairy tales are functionally how the universe works. Now, Mercedes Lackey did something similar, but it's different and darker than this. In this series, it's just sort of presumed that princesses get captured by dragons and trolls and ogres and giants and things. That's just a thing that happens. And princes go and rescue them, and it's just a thing that happens. And so there's this weird push-pull in the whole series about, about whether or not people have choices in their lives, but at the same time, that's just how the universe works. As somebody says in the next book in the series, or rather the first book chronologically in the series next written, that glass slippers aren't for princesses, they're for deserving merchants' daughters. That's just the universe. But this book, while it does mention offhand a few things from fairy tales, it doesn't have that same functional notion of the universe just works this way. It doesn't have quite that same quality of when you are a bold adventurer, you go forth and you do these things because that's just how the world works. And while to an extent, when you read this book in conjunction with the others, you can see it in the number of people who keep on saying to Daystar, ugh, when you have a sword, you do these things. That's how it works. God, don't you know anything? It's implicit in that, but due to something that is not really fully explained until the last book chronologically, or the third book if you're reading them in chronological order, it isn't explained unless and until you read that book. It's not really fully explained. And that is that Daystar, when he's sent away at the beginning of this book by his mother, she basically hands him a sword and says, go out there and don't come home until you can tell me why I sent you out there. And what it basically turns out to be is that Daystar cannot know what he's carrying because the spells used to search for him, or rather to search for the sword, are contingent upon the person who is holding the sword knowing that it is the sword of the sleeping king of the Enchanted Forest, etc., etc. And so Daystar can only succeed at his mission if he doesn't know what his mission is. And this is one of the rare times when I get to the end of a book, and because I spent a lot of time frustrated in the course of the book, for a lot of reasons, one of which I'll get back to in a minute, but for very much the reason that everybody keeps on saying, I'm sorry, Daystar, I can't tell you. I'm sorry, I can't tell you. I'm sorry, I'm not going to tell you. And it's extremely frustrating because, of course, Daystar doesn't know why his mother sent him into the woods. He doesn't know why he has a sword. He doesn't know why the sword is doing what it's doing. He doesn't know what the sword is. I mean, yes, it's a long, sharp, pointy thing that you can use to hurt people, and it is magical and does magic stuff, but he doesn't know what kind of magic stuff it does, and because it comes with a fancy title, the Sword of the Sleeping King, that clearly means something. But nobody's explaining what any of it means, and so he spends a great deal of the book just not knowing what's going on. That being said, Daystar's temperament is odd in this book. He seems to be puzzled by some things that I'm not sure why he's puzzled by them. That it seems as though there's some sort of hole in his education in relation to dealing with other people. And he seems not to get upset or insulted at all. And there's a quality of the Gary Stu, the male equivalent of the Mary Sue. There's a quality of that to him that he's a little too perfect. He does a little bit too much of never setting a foot wrong. I mean, it's not that he doesn't do a couple of boneheaded things, but even in the process of doing those boneheaded things, he remains good and stalwart and true, and it feels a little bit off because he doesn't feel like he has genuine, real human responses. I find myself far more sympathetic to his sidekick, friend, whatever you want to call her, Shiara, who is frustrated and angry and with very, very good reason and feels a lot more human than he does. That said, this comes across very much as a writing flaw in the book. Somebody might argue otherwise. They can feel free to. That's just how I feel about it. The other big thing that frustrates me in this book, though, is that there's an odd conflation between politeness and meaning what you say. Because Shiara is not very nice to people, And, and so there's sort of the lesson that if you're going to be rude, then you should get something out of it, but otherwise it costs you nothing to be polite and is usually better all round. And so Shiara winds up sort of under an enchantment because she's trying to learn how to use her magic, but she winds up under an enchantment that says you can use your magic, but only if you're polite. The caveat on the politeness, though, is very odd because that caveat is you have to mean it. But as we all know, there's an art and a gift to people being able to be perfectly polite while thoroughly insulting at the same time and meaning nothing of what they say. And to say that somebody needs to mean what they say when they're being polite is a step too far. And I find that thoroughly aggravating. I find it extra aggravating that there is this lizard, Suze, who kind of follows Daystar around and comes up with and comes up with information that is frequently a little bit cryptic, and he's sort of helpful and sort of not. But the thing about Suze is I find him really, really annoying. And the reason I find him annoying is because he has this aggravating tendency to say these really, really offensive things and then get snippy because someone else was rude. And the thing is that these offensive things that he says get excused by Daystar, who winds up saying, oh, I think that's just how he is. But just how he is a really, really thin excuse for somebody, being... is a really, really thin excuse for somebody being really quite offensive. And then complaining that and then complaining later that a person is being rude to him. It's hypocritical and it's aggravating. And the thing is that it's like, quite safe in the middle of the Enchanted Forest with wizards after us, Shiara said sarcastically. You're crazy. I am? No, I'm not at all. How very rude. Shiara, well, it is dangerous to be out here, even if you do have that stupid sword, she said defensively. What's wrong with saying so? When she apologizes to Suze, he says, oh, I'm sorry, Suze. You are? No, you're not at all. How disappointing. I accept. Well, okay, but we don't apologize because we mean it. We apologize because we are soothing ruffled feelings. To say that somebody has to mean an apology is unfair, and and it is unfair and unkind and unnecessary, and I don't like him, and he aggravates me through every appearance in the book. And so now I'm basically just about out of time, And I will continue talking about this series in the next episode, which will be dealing with dragons. And I hope to see you all next week.